There are places where stone seems to breathe, exhaling whispers from a world that vanished 3,000 years ago. Deep in the Peruvian Andes, a temple complex waits in the mist, its corridors carved not for the living, but for something invisible. What remains of Chavín de Huántar is a labyrinth of polished granite, where one architectural feature spirals downward into absolute darkness. A staircase turns upon itself, descending into the bedrock like a tightened shell, its steps worn smooth by ancient, deliberate feet. You are not meant to find comfort here, because this was a machine built to reshape human perception through sound and fear. The moment you enter, the temperature drops, and the faintest noise multiplies into a symphony of echoes that seem to come from everywhere at once. This is a mystery that lives in the bones of the earth, a puzzle of acoustics, ritual, and the profound human need to control the unseen. To understand the spiral staircase, we must first feel the weight of the mountain that holds it, a sanctuary constructed around 900 years before the Common Era. Chavín de Huántar rose as a ceremonial epicenter, a pilgrimage destination where people from distant valleys encountered the divine through sensory overload. Its builders engineered a subterranean network of galleries, shafts, and canals, deliberately directing water through hidden channels to generate a ceaseless, otherworldly roar. At the heart of this stone organism stands the Lanzón, a 15-foot granite monolith carved into a snarling, fanged deity, still anchored in the chamber that imprisons it. The spiral staircase leads to spaces like this, narrow passages that constrict the body just before revealing the snarling face of a god. Archaeologists who first mapped these tunnels in the 20th century found themselves disoriented, their sense of time and direction crumbling in the blackness. They discovered that the architecture was not random, but a precisely tuned instrument where every angle and polished wall served a specific acoustic purpose. Sound refuses to behave predictably in these tunnels, bending around corners, amplifying whispers into roars, and plunging shouts into suffocating silence. History tells us the Chavín civilizations flourished without a written language, leaving behind only the mute evidence of their engineering genius. Excavations revealed beautifully carved conch-shell trumpets known as pututus, ornaments that were not merely decorative but functional sonic weapons. When researchers blew into a replica pututu deep inside the labyrinth, the sound bounced and fractured into a churning metallic wail. The very air seemed to liquefy, and those present described a visceral unease, a tightening of the chest that felt physically imposed. This was not mere superstition, but a calculated application of physics, exploiting low-frequency resonance to induce anxiety and a sense of bodily threat. To descend its curved flight was to leave behind the rational world of daylight and enter a realm governed solely by auditory illusion. Mainstream archaeology expected to find a simple temple, but instead it found a Neolithic machine for altering consciousness. The anomaly lies in the sophistication, a level of psychoacoustic understanding that should not have existed in the pre-Inca highlands. Here, logic breaks down because the builders transformed solid rock into a living membrane between the human soul and a terrifying divine power. You can imagine an initiate, skin slick with cold sweat, gripping the damp wall of the descending staircase as the first blast of a trumpet tears through the darkness. They could not see the source of the sound. It seemed to emanate from the stone itself, from the snarling mouth of the hidden idol, or from deep inside their own skull. The evidence points to a cult of control, where priests engineered acoustic environments to solidify their status as intermediaries with ferocious supernatural forces. Water rushing beneath the floors created a foundational roar, a constant low-frequency hum known to modern science as a trigger for unease. Layered upon this was the sharp, chaotic dissonance of the conch shells, manipulated through ventilation shafts that acted as pre-Columbian sound mixers. It is a chilling design because the labyrinth ceases to be architecture and becomes a narrative, one where the pilgrim is systematically broken down and remade. Where traditional temples rely on visual grandeur, Chavín relies on the grip of the invisible, proving that what we cannot pinpoint with our eyes terrifies us the most. The boundary between hard evidence and desperate speculation becomes thin, yet the physical wall carvings mirror the auditory torment perfectly. Serpentine creatures twist alongside snarling jaguars, their images flickering in lamplight, a visual echo of the screeching, swooping sounds flying through the halls. The spiral staircase was the throat of this stone beast, swallowing initiates whole, disgorging them hours later transformed or utterly shattered. Some researchers theorize that the galleries were amplified echo chambers for ritual chanting, blending the human voice with the divine until the two became indistinguishable. Local whispers in the surrounding highlands have long held that the Huántar ruins are still alive, still humming with a power that the modern world has forgotten how to hear. A darker hypothesis suggests that the priests understood the resonance of the human skull, intentionally using the tunnels to create standing waves that induced auditory hallucinations. Standing at the bottom of the spiral, sealed off from the sky, your own heartbeat begins to synchronize with the dripping water and the distant, rhythmic groaning of the earth. The artifacts offer answers, but the soil beneath them whispers a different story. One of rituals so private and terrible they were never meant to be excavated. A theory emerges from the labyrinthine layout, proposing that the disorientation was the goal, not a side effect. Confusion became a form of psychological bondage, priming the mind to accept the impossible, like a god speaking directly through stone. Contrast this with the rational attempts to explain it away as primitive ritual nonsense, and the chilling reality that the architecture still functions perfectly today. We cannot dismiss the builders because their magic still works. The sound still confuses. The staircase still disorients. The stone still inspires a fear that logic cannot soothe. Acoustic engineers now map the galleries using laser technology, only to confirm what the ancient lips and stones already knew 3 millennia ago. The science of resonant frequency is written into the very geometry, proving that rhythm and sound are older pathways to the sacred than any written word. Yet, for all our instruments and measurements, we cannot capture the living terror of a ceremony in total darkness. We record the decibels, but we cannot record the whispering of the priests, the scent of burning resin, or the cold touch of the obsidian blade against the skin. A shadow moves across the ancient stone, not cast by any living body, but by the memory of a structural vibration that once shattered personal identity. The labyrinth presents a maze of dead ends, literally and intellectually, where the only way out was to ascend the spiral staircase reborn as a believer. To navigate the theories is to walk through a fog of anthropological guesswork, each step echoing with a lost culture's laughter at our simplistic models. Some argue it was a house of initiation, others a place of celestial observation, and others still a sophisticated hydraulic temple. But the staircase binds them all, a constant spiral symbolizing the journey between the underworld, the earthly realm, and the celestial peaks represented by the highland site. The engineers of Chavín harnessed the dread of the infinite because a true spiral has no end, only a tightening loop into the eternal unknown. The human obsession with Chavín de Huántar has driven explorers mad, from the Spanish conquistadors who fled in terror to modern acousticians who spend decades inside just one duct. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of this silence and hear the mountain gently breathe. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but as you look upon these ruins, you realize time has only buried the answers deeper under the sediment of forgotten ritual. The priests who engineered this sonic observatory never recorded their formulas, never inscribed a manual, because the knowledge was the very source of their absolute authority. Their power lay in the secret, in the unseen manipulation of air pressure and vibration, a tradition passed from ear to ear until the civilization crumbled. Imagine being an archaeologist alone in the gallery at night, when a shift in barometric pressure accidentally activates the ancient water channels. The groan rises from below. The spiral staircase begins to hum, and for a terrifying moment, you are not a scientist but an initiate facing the deity. The psychological toll on those who seek the ultimate truth is a permanent state of awe, the maddening realization that the builders achieved something we can barely replicate. Expeditions have mapped every inch of the surface, but the deeper labyrinth remains partly sealed, collapsed, or deliberately backfilled by the ancients themselves. What did they seal in? What sound did they decide was too dangerous to ever be released into the open air again? The fragmented records of bone and ceramic point toward a religion bound by terror, where the spiral staircase was the axis of a universe that must be constantly soothed with sound. Fear was not a flaw in their design, but the central pillar holding up the cosmic order, a dramatic contrast to the pastoral expectations of early anthropology. We carry our scientific hubris down those steps, only to find our instruments confirming that the walls are shifting imperceptibly, keeping a lazy rhythm that defies geological logic. The human element is written in the tread of countless feet, polished grooves that reveal the exact stance of a ritual procession halting in fear. The obsessive search for the Chavín mind has consumed generations, each researcher leaving a fragment of their own sanity in the wet, whispering dark. Some have tried to reenact the rituals, blowing the ancient shells at the solstice sunrise, only to be struck by a wave of nausea and a profound sense of melancholy. The frequencies penetrate the bone marrow, they say, triggering a sadness so deep it feels like mourning for a god that is still waiting underground. These are not spirits in the supernatural sense, but recordings of emotion trapped in stone, released like a fossilized sigh whenever the conditions are right. The spiral staircase does not let you forget your own mortality. Each step downward is a removal of your modern immunities to primal sound. We are left with the profound curiosity of a child, terrified and delighted, wondering who hid the monster in the labyrinth of the mind. Faces stare back from the tenon heads embedded in the walls, stone visages that seem to ripple with the echoes, transitioning from human to jaguar in the flickering shadows. The archaeologists who have spent the longest in those tunnels speak of a deep bond with the ancient designers, a shared understanding that the physical world is a mask. They know the mystery will never fully yield because the magic of Chavín is not a code to be broken, but a relationship to be managed. To hear the spiral staircase perfectly calm is perhaps more terrifying than its roar, a silence so dense it screams of the millennia it has waited. There is a certain psychology that develops in total acoustic isolation, where your own nervous system starts generating sounds to fill the void. Perhaps that is where the gods were born, not in the trumpet blasts, but in the ringing silence between them, inside the initiate's terrified, listening mind. The fragility of human reason is exposed when we realize that air, arranged by intention, can dismantle our sense of self and rewrite our beliefs. As we climb back toward the thin, high-altitude light, the staircase feels less like an escape and more like a birth canal into a world that now seems drab and muted. The philosophical weight settles as the wind hits your face, a reminder that we seek cosmic truths only to be destroyed by them. Chavín de Huántar endures not because we have solved its riddles, but because it refuses to let go of its power over the human imagination. The ethereal hum that once filled the galleries has faded into a geological murmur, yet the enigma sharpens with every modern analysis. We are left staring into the abyss of history, a void where sound, fear, and control were once woven into a single, unbreakable tapestry of power. To step into a reconstructed replica of the tunnel in a museum is to hear a wailing sound, but to step into the Andean mountain itself is to feel the weight of its purpose. There is no false closure, no final mural that explains the ritual's true meaning, leaving the eternal puzzle to float in the mist. The stars rotate above the temple, the same stars that watched the collapse, but the cosmic secret remains locked in the stone. We inherit the silence, the polished steps, and the futile desire to resurrect a song that was never meant for our ears. The spiral staircase will continue to turn upon itself, a perpetual question mark carved into the planet by a people who knew the terrifying physics of belief. You carry the echo out with you, a subtle ringing that makes you question whether the ancient experiment is still running, whether the temple is still listening. This is the enduring enigma that a civilization without metal or the wheel built a technology of pure sensation that our devices can measure but not fully comprehend. The hard bounds of history dissolve into the mists, and for a moment, we stand together in the darkness, humbled before a genius that used fear as a spiritual scalpel. To walk the spiral staircase is to accept that some doors to the past are better left ajar, their shadows protecting us from a knowledge too heavy for the modern soul. And in the end, the mountain keeps its secret, exhaling a quiet, ancient boom through the empty throne room, waiting for the next listener to descend into the sound, the fear, and the absolute control.